Good morning, East Point. Thank you for joining us today. It's a great day for everyone to be at home on their couch in the rain, but we want you to worship with us today, and we are praying that the weather is great so we can meet in person with you next week.
Find their way at the sound. moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you.
Good morning, East Point. We are really glad you're here this morning. We are just having a great time with each other, worshiping with you. We hope that you enjoyed the worship. It's just every week, it fires me up, gets me excited, and I think so many of us are excited for next week where we're going to hopefully be together in person. But today is Palm Sunday, and we want to recognize that. We want to understand that the gravity of the day is not lost on us. And I want to read something real quick to you. It says, Jesus set apart the week before his crucifixion to remind his disciples that death wouldn't win and his kingdom would never end. But because they didn't understand what was coming, they didn't realize he was also telling them, I love you and goodbye. Today, Holy Week, is a reminder that God isn't finished, because even in those moments when our expectations crumble, hope is still coming. God is not done. And I have chills reading that because God is not done. He's not done working. He's not done with us. And I think that his goals and his mission for us as a church and as a church body and a church family are just beyond our expectations. So we're just excited to be a part of what God has for us. We hope that you are too. And as we're here this week, as we encourage you each week, check in on Facebook. It's an easy way to let your friends and family know you're a part of this family, that you're here attending church. And if you would like, I'd encourage you every week to hit that share button. As you're watching the service, it just takes a quick second, hit share. You can share right to your feed, and then our live service will get posted to all the friends that you have. It's a great and easy way to share God's message with those that you care about, and even those that you don't. That's okay too. We want to know that God's love goes to everybody. And with that, if you haven't signed up yet, you can text the word East Point to 94000, and this gets you connected to our text message service. We send out updates for all the events and things that are happening at East Point. It's a great way to stay connected, and especially as we are getting back to our in-person services, this is the primary method that will let you know if services are being moved virtual for inclement weather. We'll still post on Facebook and we'll still post on our social media, but the text is the fastest and easiest way to get connected. So text East Point to 94000 to get plugged in and connected today. Don't wait, do it now. And we'll make sure that we keep posting and sharing that. So if you're not connected, you can. And then just as a reminder, you can also text in. You can respond to that message thread, and you can let us know what's going on. Several of you have shared prayer requests and shared thoughts and commentary, and we love that. So if you want to respond back, know that people are here, seeing those messages and responding to them. And as always, every week we want to take time to give of our tithes and offerings. And it's always important, but it's so important right now because we're trying to raise funds to begin construction on the house on the church land. And so we would love for you to ask God what he's going to give through you and both of your tithes and offerings and towards the construction. So with that, I'm going to pray real quick and ask God to just bless the offering we're about to receive. God, you are amazing. You are mighty, God, and you just give us breath. You give us life, God. And as we read this morning, you are not done. Your work here through East Point is not done, God. And we know that, and we are excited to see what you have for us. We ask this morning that you would just please be with our efforts to build at the church property, God, that you would just help us receive the funds needed to begin construction and create a community center, God, where not only East Point can meet, but our community can grow, can fellowship, and just become part of our family, God. We're just super excited to see what you have for us. We're excited to be together next week. We ask for good weather, and we just ask for a great time together. And we just thank you and praise you, God. In your name we pray. Amen. As always, you can give on our website at eastpoint.org/give. You can mail a check to the address there, 4087 Kirkwood St. George's Road in Bear, Delaware, 19709. 01. I keep giving the Middletown one. Thank you for correcting me. 19701. I even looked at it and said 9. You can text give to EP to 94000, and you'll get a link where you can donate as well. And if you're on the site, to give towards tithe and offerings, you can do general fund. To give towards the building, there's a drop down for the building fund. So you see here, when you're on the website, you can click general fund, and then you can also see building fund. Anything given towards the building will go directly towards that fund. And I believe as of last week, we had, I think we're up to around $4,000 to $5,000 raised so far. So we are moving in the right direction. We encourage you again to pray for what God would have you to give. If it's a one-time gift or a reoccurring gift, And then, as we've mentioned several times, next week, Easter Sunday, we are back in person at the house. We'll be out back. It's going to be a great time. I encourage you to be there. We love the ability to be online, but man, being in person is something special. So if you can be there, we encourage it. Bring a friend, bring a chair, plenty of space to distance and be safe. And it's just going to be an amazing day of worship. We're going to have communion, and we're just really excited for Easter Sunday. So plan now to be there 10 a.m. next Sunday at the house. We're going to put a bunch of advertisements out this week on Facebook and our social. So stay tuned. We want you to be there, and we can't wait to see you. And in preparation for that, we're going to have a cleanup day. So if you're available on Saturday, April 3rd, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the house, we're going to be doing some cleanup. We're going to get the grounds ready. So if you can be there on Saturday, if you want any information, you can contact Lise at eastpoint.org, or her phone number's here. We'll also post this on Facebook today so you can see it there as well. We'd love to get folks out. And of course, as we always say, the more people, the faster the work will go. So if you can be there on Saturday, we're going to clean up, get ready, an effort for the service on Sunday. And then the yard sale is still happening. It has moved to Saturday, May 1st. So be aware, the yard sale is now Saturday, May 1st. It's from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the house on the property there. Items can still be dropped off for donation on April 10th from 3 to 4. And if you have any questions, you can contact Lise again, Lise at eastpoint.org, and she can help work with you to organize drop-offs. We still need volunteers, so if you'd like to volunteer that day, that would be great as well. And then last but not least, our post-service connection. We do this every Sunday. I can't tell you how much fun it is. The folks that get on, we have a great time fellowshipping and just hanging out. So I encourage you, if you haven't done it yet, jump on with us. The link is in the comments below. It's on the Facebook events page. It also gets sent on the text every week. And if you have been visiting, with us on there, we can't wait to see you again. So with that, we're glad you're here. And JD, message.
All righty. Thank you, Josh. Well, happy Palm Sunday. I did not bring palms to pass out, and I don't have the transportation to get them all to you, so we will just have to imagine, or you can use these palms, that you got there at home. But we don't have necessarily a Palm Sunday service, because that would be way too conventional for me, I guess. But we're still going on with what we have doing with the Overcoming series, where we are looking at that, because we've looked at the fact that we're meant to be overcomers. We've talked about how do we overcome. I got to move over further. Okay. All righty. I'm over here. So, we looked at we could overcoming depression, overcoming fear. We've looked at some various things like that. Today, we're going to look at the issue of anger, about how do we overcome anger. And anger is an issue that, to me, it seems to be growing as a society, that our anger is getting more and more. And we can look at all the various reasons as to why do we have so much anger going on, why is this happening. I think there's a variety of variables. One of the things that goes on is we are a digital society. We can do things online, and one of the things that happens with online is a lot of anonymous stuff. We're able to say nasty things without taking responsibility for it. We can do it anonymously. And so there's things like that, and I'm not trying to blame the internet, because we all have things, ways in which we are we do it on our own. The internet's a good thing, the internet's a bad thing, the internet is just a thing, and we make out of it what we make out of it. We bring to it whatever we bring to it. So, and we'll be doing a few technical things apparently here, moving some things. We'll just keep going, ignore what's going on there. That's good. That way you're not looking straight up my nose, I guess. That's good. That is never an enjoyable view. But so we're looking at, and so one of the things I want to look at, because there's one of these arguments. Well, is anger really a bad thing? It's like there's times when you really need to be angry, and professionals debate this thing. Healthcare professional debate, is anger good or bad in some ways. But we're going to look at it from the perspective of the anger, which is detrimental to us, because for the most part, and this is one of the things that basically all the professionals agree on, generally speaking, anger is not good for you. In fact, it's it damages your health. We're going to look at some of the anger issues. One of the first ones we're looking at here is that it damages you. Anger damages you, and it damages others. We say things, we do things in anger that is just not good, and it causes problems, and it keeps us from being able to have, because when we are angry, we are more likely to say things that are damaging, and later on we say, well, I don't know what I was thinking, or I shouldn't have said that, but I was just so angry. And we use the anger as the excuse for being hurtful and mean. And it's not an excuse. Anger is painful. In fact, for those of you who are Buddhist fans, if you've studied Buddhism at all, you know that anger is considered one of the 3 poisons of the mind. And so it's right there along with greed and foolishness. Those are the 3 poisons in Buddhism for the mind. But anger, greed, and foolishness. But the fact that it's recognized that it poisons your mind. In Proverbs, we're told that anger is overwhelming, that it overwhelms us. Now, when you're thinking about this anger, you're probably thinking about anger from one of 2 perspectives. Either from the fact that you tend to get angry at others, or at situations, or at yourself, or whatever it might be, but you tend to get angry. The other one is other people tend to be angry with you. And depending upon which way it tends to lean in your life, it might be how you look at that. We're going to look at some things that deal with both sides of that, because the things that work with them work with both sides of it. But so whichever way is the bigger issue for you, take a look at that. And I encourage you to look at this also from how does anger touch my life, not how does anger, how is this affecting my husband's life, because, he's got such an issue with that, or, don't be thinking about it from the perspective of other people, but think about it in terms of yourself. What can you do about anger? But anger, it's damaging. Also, anger, it separates you from God and from others. It builds a barrier. It separates. We're told that in James that our anger doesn't work God's righteousness. It moves us away. And we don't want that. We don't want to be moving away from God. At least I don't want that. Hopefully you don't want that. Because God's the one who has designed my life, and I know that I enjoy the most. I have more joy and happiness when I'm in line with Him than I am when I'm moving away from Him. And so that the anger, it puts that separation, and we don't do what we should do when we're angry. That should be fairly self-evident. It also moves us away from others because, let's face it, you don't want to be around somebody who's angry all the time, and neither do other people. So if you have a lot of anger, people will find reasons to avoid you. If everything you've got to say is kind of a nasty, angry thing, people don't want to be around that. So we want to avoid that as well. And that basically, I say anger, it destroys the quality of life. Now, the book of Proverbs has a lot to say about this, because it talks about how it will often refer to the angry man, which is also one of these things that we look at, because if you have a tendency to give in to anger, you become known as an angry person. It is a characteristic or a trait that defines you. So there's those that will every once in a while get angry, and there are those who live an angry lifestyle. They're just angry all the time. And when that happens, it says that around an angry person, there is dissension, there is strife. Those things are always being stirred up, and it's like it feeds on itself. That when you're angry about things, then things around you start to get all stirred up, and that gets you angry about the things around you that are getting stirred up, and you're saying nasty things to other people, so other people are saying nasty things to you, and it just gets this pattern that goes. And the quality of life just kind of disappears. It's not enjoyable at all. And a sad piece of all of this is it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to. Anger is not one of those things. There are so many things that we love to find excuses for. And my favorite definition of an excuse is it's the skin of a reason stuffed with a lie. And that so often is what it is. We come up with things and say, well, you know what? I'm Irish, and so that's just how we do it. We get angry, or my dad was angry, or I grew up in an alcoholic home, and that anger was always a part of it. So that's why, and we use it as an excuse to be angry. And there is no excuse. It's a choice. When we're angry, by and large, we choose to be. And you can say, yeah, but Jesus was angry. He went into the temple and cast people. He did. He did. And we are told that we are to be angry and to not sin in our anger. And some people say, well, see, it's telling us, it's commanding us to be angry. And it's not so much that it's commanding you to be angry, but it's saying, in your anger, don't sin. So that when you are angry, don't do it, because our anger doesn't work the righteousness of God. It doesn't work out that well. So he's saying, yes, there are times you can be angry, but if we're honest with ourselves, how often is your anger truly righteous? How often are you angry because of the things? I think David is a beautiful example of where there's righteous anger, and he had times when he wanted, because he was pursued, he was belittled, he was, his life was constantly being sought after, and he didn't get angry. But he went, and while he's hiding from those who are trying to take his life, during which time he was always saying, I will not lift my hand against God's anointed. Those that are chasing me, that's not up to me to take care of that. So instead of getting angry about that, he said, that's up to God. But then he went and hid amongst the Philistines. And he became angry because the Philistines were disrespectful to his God. And he became angry on behalf of God, not on behalf of himself. He actually was treated pretty well amongst the Philistines. So he's a good example of it's possible to be angry and to be righteous in your anger. It's just that that's not very common for most of us. That's not really what happens to most of us. And so I just want to say, so yeah, you can be, but I want you to think about it. But when we think about how do we overcome anger? Well, I'm going to give you an alliterated plan here, if you will, to overcome it. And the first thing I've got in here is just pause. If you pause and put some space in, it gives you a moment to not react. So often it is our initial instant reaction that causes trouble, that either causes us to be angry, or it gives fuel to our anger, or it causes someone else to be angry. But if we pause and just take a breath, stop and think about it. This is the whole idea of, there's a number of ways. Stephen Covey would put it that you listen first, talk second. And it's kind of like you want to understand something before you just react. And so often, somebody starts to say something, we hear the beginning of it, we're like, and we just react, as opposed to listening, hearing the whole thing out, taking a moment, and then be able to say something. So it's putting that little break in there. I often think of this, if you took some very early on, like psychology classes, if you ever went to, even in high school, I think they would teach you about Pavlov's dogs, in terms of how we tend to respond. Whenever they're going to try to teach you about something behavioral and rewarding something and making it happen more often. Pavlov was a scientist who he wanted to try to train different behaviors into things, and he used dogs for his example. So he had some dogs, and he had them where they could measure the salivation that the dog had, and he would ring a bell and lay down some food. And the dog would, as soon as that food came out, would start salivating. But he kept doing it, where he'd ring the bell first and then put down the food. And pretty soon, he could ring a bell, and the dogs would start to salivate, even when he didn't give them any food. And he could do that for a while. He had to do that quite a while before they would stop salivating, because they got into the pattern. And from that, we learn a whole bunch of other things, which we, like intermittent reinforcement or random type stuff, where you ring the bell, and sometimes you give food, sometimes you don't. And those things are really hard to extinguish. Well, and people will talk about, well, what could I do? My wife came home and she said this, and it made me so angry. I had to say this. What else could I do? And when I hear that, what I think about is that you are behaving like a dog, which, and a general rule, is usually pretty good, because dogs are really forgiving. But you're behaving like an animal in that, as humans, we have a space between stimulus and response. And that little pause that comes between stimulus and response that we can put in there, we can just react like an animal and have no space, or we can put that space in there, and in there put a choice. And it's during that pause, that choice, that we can actually distinguish ourselves from animals and say that, we don't have to just react, but we can think. We can make a decision. And Proverbs talks about what would be a great thing to be doing during that time. Because over and over again in Proverbs, it said we get sayings like, a soft answer turns away wrath. And so that's what we want, a gentle response. It kind of quells anger. Now, we're used to thinking about that, like if somebody's saying something nasty to us and we say something nice back, that can really help avoid some real conflict. And that's true. That is a great thing to do. We're told in the New Testament, in Luke, if we're supposed to pray for one another. We're supposed to treat, those that treat you badly, treat them well. Love your enemies. But it's also true that if we can calm ourselves down and have a soft answer that we give when we're the ones who are going to be angry, it quells our own anger. It settles our own heart. I had a funeral yesterday that I was at, and a family that I've known for a long time. And the man that died was a very gentle man. And one of the things that that he was known for is that people they could say things, they could treat him poorly. He could have coworkers who would say nasty things to him, and he would never respond to that. And when others would say, why don't you just defend yourself? He said, I'm not going to speak poorly of a coworker. That's just something I'm not going to do. And when a situation came up when a coworker was having trouble and it was a coworker who had been rather rude and mean to him, and even the boss came and talked, said, hey, I hear this is going on, what do we do? And he basically said, I'm not going to say anything against the coworker. And when asked, well, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to help them. I'm going to help this person. And hearing the story from his wife, who said, because she was one who was like, hey, they're after you. Why don't you stand up for yourself? And she said, in that moment, she was so proud of him. That because the strength it took to say, this person who's treating me badly, I'm gonna help them while they're in their time of need, even though, if I was on fire, they'd be more likely to throw gas than water. But when they're on fire, I'm only going to bring water. I'm only going to help put it out. And I think that happens in that pause, and it's so good. One of the ways that Proverbs puts it, it says, good sense makes one slow to anger, and it's his glory to overlook an offense. And I think that we're so worried sometimes that we not be taken advantage of, that we miss out on the glory it can be to just absorb the offense. To say it's like, I'm just going to overlook that. I'm not going to react to that. And it is good sense to be slow to anger. So the second P I've got for you is perspective. And what I mean by perspective is get out of your shoes and into somebody else's. One of the times we get so angry because we can't take ourselves and put us in another position. We can only see our own, and we're so busy and so focused on our own perspective that we don't see that there are other perspectives on the same situation. And if we will look at those other perspectives, if we will stop and think, what is this like for the other person? What I just did, how does that affect them? And sometimes it might be something very innocent. This is one of those things I try to think about while I'm driving a lot of times, because there are occasions when I can probably be more aggressive than I should be on the road. I think that there's a certain speed that everybody should drive. And faster than that speed, you're being reckless, and slower than that speed is you're being annoying. But my speed is the perfect speed, and everybody should be going that. And the highway should be open for me, And it doesn't work that way very often. Because I get behind people that are going slower than I have prescribed as the appropriate speed. And there are times when I'm going faster than others think is the appropriate speed. And as a result, on the road, there's a lot of communication that takes place. And we see it in a lot of ways. Communication can take place through, hand gestures, through the horn that we have, through that we're gonna react with our car the way they feel like, hey, you cut me off, I'm gonna speed up and get around, I'm gonna cut you off short, then I'm gonna go slower, or I'm gonna come to a red light and sit there and wait until it turns. I'm gonna come to a green light, wait till it turns yellow, and then I'm gonna pull through so you're stuck at a red light. I would never do that to you. But I'm just saying that you've seen all these things happen. You've seen I was living in California at the time when the term road rage got coined, because there was so much going on where people would just, it would become so much so that people were shooting each other on the road. You cut me off, well, I'm going to shoot you for it. And it's a classic picture of where we couldn't get perspective. We didn't know what was going on for the other person. And I think when we get perspective, and I've had a lot of coaching in getting perspective, like, well, maybe that person is on their way to the hospital with a loved one, and they're not thinking very clearly, or they're not paying as close of attention as they should because they're overwhelmed with this heartache. And I don't want to hear those things, because at that moment, I don't want to feel compassion for that person. I want to be angry. And that's what we do, isn't it? We look for ways to feed our anger. But if we can get the perspective that says, maybe there is a way for me to not be angry, and instead to be compassionate, to arouse empathy, not fury. And I think that to get out of our shoes and to get it from another's perspective, that can really help us. So we have to consider those viewpoints of others. And the last P in all of this is, I say, pray. We need to pray because, like I said, it tells us in Luke, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. And you're like, well, yeah, I'll pray for them. I'll pray that God puts them in their place and turns back the evil on their head. And yeah, that is an option. I suppose you can pray those things. But again, I wanted to remind you that you don't usually have God's mind. And you don't see the whole picture. And so I have found a much more effective prayer that we can have is when you are angry at somebody, you pray for that somebody. And I'm talking about you pray that God will bless that person. You pray for them. And you might be praying in that God will, like I often pray that God will take that person and draw them close, so that that person can see the impact of their behavior on others. But I pray, and there's been a few times in my life, whether it's been another businessman, because in business, there's ways in which, business often seems to be kind of a cutthroat sort of a thing when you're trying to get ahead. But I've run across some business people whose methods and ways I find so abhorrent that I find that I just can't stand the person. Or sometimes in politics, we all get fired up with our politics. That seems to be more and more a type of an issue where it's not just that we have different political opinions, but that we hate people who have a different political opinion. And I've been in these situations where I find my emotions getting raised up, the anger rising up, and every time I would hear the person's name, I would realize I'm starting to generate feelings inside which I don't like. I'm getting my blood pressure's rising, and plenty of research on the physical damage that's done to us through our anger. But as I'm doing it, there's been a few different times when I've taken on a campaign where I've picked out the person who annoyed me the most, and I was going to start to pray for them daily. And I would pray for them day in and day out that God would bless them, that God would give me his heart, that I could see that person as God sees that person, that I would be able to appreciate their insecurities, which make them so obnoxious, not just see the obnoxiousness and say, well, they're such a jerk, but to recognize there's things behind that. There's reasons I don't know about. There's life events that I don't know about that play into that. And how can I, because I have always looked at it, that as a child of God, the one thing that's not an option for me is to hate others. And anger seems to be the quickest path to hating others. And so I've looked at, and I've really worked at God, with God saying, God, give me your heart. So when I'm praying for others, I pray for myself. I say, God, give me an attitude of love towards this person instead of hate. Not just help me to tolerate them, because I know that tolerance is it's a big buzzword right now. And tolerance, I think, is kind of along the lines of saying, I'm going to hold on to my bad feelings for this person, but I won't say anything about it. I'll just sort of try to put up with it. I'll grin and bear it. I don't want to grin and bear it. I think grinning and bearing it is a great recipe for an ulcer. It's a great way to keep that blood pressure up. What I want my heart to be changed. He says he takes away our heart of stone and gives us a heart of flesh. And I think there's a part of us that naturally keeps trying to inch back towards that stone. We want to harden our heart. And I just pray, God, change my heart. And even when the person, I'm thinking, from the flesh perspective, I'm thinking, well, the real heart that needs to be changed is this other guy. That's whose heart needs to be changed. So that's what I should be praying for. But I'm always reminded that, you know what? I don't know that other person. I have no control over that other person. So what I can do is I can pray for them to be blessed, for them to come to see. Because when I see a person who is ruled by anger or nastiness, or who is ruled by deceptive practices, I see somebody who's not enjoying their life, that they're not having moments of happiness and goodness nearly as much as what they could be if they were filled with gratitude, if they were filled with kindness. And so rather than trying to control how others around me are going to react to me, I try to control what is my action. And it does require a lot of times of me having to say, stop. What is going on? How can I pray for this person so that I don't end up hating them? Because as much as I feel like hate is not an option for me, I know that I've been guilty of hate. There have been people, and I've gotten to where I've been so fed up, and I do what I think most of us do, is when I really hate somebody, I rehearse in my head the things about them that are so hateful. If I'm angry at somebody, I rehearse the things about them that make me angry at them. Because if I rehearse the things about them that make them wonderful, it's really hard to hold on to the anger. If I sit there and I think and I'm positive, so that's why I want us to be thinking about it. You pause, you take that break. You try to get perspective and look at it from all angles. What does it look like from their side? And then pray for them and pray for yourself. Because what you're trying to do here is you're trying to take your life and you're trying to direct it so it's on a trajectory of love, not anger. A trajectory of love and not hate. Of forgiveness. Because that is the life we want to live, whether we know it or not. Because the life which is characterized by the forgiveness, by the lack of anger, is a life filled with joy and with peace. Anger is like the polar opposite of peace. So I'm just going to encourage you this week. Catch yourself when you find yourself getting angry. If you're driving along and that person swerves out of the development that without looking and comes right in front of you, and you want to tell them that they're number one, take a moment, take a breath, and maybe think about all the times when you've accidentally pulled out, when you didn't look thoroughly enough and cut somebody off, and give them the benefit of the doubt. Extend to them grace. Make it your glory to overlook an offense. It's not that there was no offense there, but it is your glory to overlook that offense and use good sense and try to be slow to anger. Let's pray. God, we do thank you that you are such a good God, that you have all the reason in the world to be angry at us, and we give it to you all the time, but instead you consistently show us love. And it is in large part this quality that makes you a God so worthy of praise, that you are not so small that our anger diminishes you. And we just thank you that you've given us this example, that you have taught us, and you've told us so much in Scripture, that you've given us Proverbs so full of wisdom that lets us know that anger destroys our life, and it doesn't have to. That people are going to think differently than us, and we don't have to give in to that. We can instead choose to love, choose to bear what they bring to the relationship. We can choose to pray for them and help us to make those choices, to not be just stimulus response animals, but to be thoughtful people who make a difference and can distinguish ourselves with forgiveness. In Christ's name, amen. So this is the second to last week. We have one more week to do of the overcoming, but next week it's overcoming death, because we're going to be looking at the resurrection. So I hope to see you next week in person, and if not in person, we will still have this streaming stuff available for you, but if you can make it in person, we are very excited about it. I'll see you next week.